Okay. Good morning, world. How are we today? Okay, so this morning, I wanted to talk about something that I had watched on Parliament Time in the day. The one that had resulted in a division required. And I'm not going to talk about the what happened, why there was a division required, because I don't have all the information on that yet. Although I would like to say on that I think it is good to see I don't know his exact title, but one of the ministers stood his ground, even though that was going to possibly mean him getting suspended. Anyway, I think it was that he stood his ground on something that was important, by the way, not just being a douche. And anyway, the thing that caught my attention on Parliament Time that I wanted to talk about was, again, I don't remember the guy's actual proper name and title, but one of the ministers, which I believe was for the Labor Party, was speaking, and he was saying that like approximately 90% of young people, which is like classified as, I believe, like 40 and under, 40 years old and under, about 90% of that age group predominantly make their income from their job. And it caught my attention because I'd never really heard a politician sort of speak about this class group like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it is what he actually said is kind of important, and I don't think it got the spotlight that it needed, or that it needs. Okay, because what he's saying, as a wealthy man himself in a very well-paid job with really good, future prospects for himself and his family, and probably also currently with investments in various things, like all the politicians tend to have, don't they? Now, he was talking about everyday people. He's talking about the people whose backs are broken on a daily basis to keep this country running, okay? He's talking about us. And he's saying that about 90% of young people only are making income off of going to a job. Now, the reason why that's important and why it caught my attention is because, well, straight away I thought, how else do you make money? Because I'm not trained the way that some people, especially if you're brought up in like a wealthy family, or a family that has a successful business, maybe it's even like a family enterprise or whatever, you're kind of trained, if you come from that background, to think about money and wealth differently to how you're trained to think about money if you come from a blue collar or a low socioeconomic background. Okay, if you come from, let's just use simple terms, if you grew up poor, and you didn't have brand name this and that, and you didn't have a 2-story house, and you didn't have a fancy car, and all these sort of things. If you grew up what we would call poor, right, then you have a particular mindset about money. And I believe that it's quite often referred to in, even other YouTube videos as being sort of the cause or like the roadblock between you and the life that you want. Normally these are like manifesting videos and stuff. So like you and the life that you want to manifest. You're blocking yourself by having a negative attitude towards money or about money, okay? And I do think that can be true, because as I've said in other videos, I do believe that a lot of this world has to do with energetics, and your thoughts are like energetic projections, and so you would attract or repel things in your life based on your thoughts, okay? That's what I believe is going on. And so when we apply, what we were just talking about with the mindset and with it depends on how you were raised and what environment. Of course there are people who are walking around who believe that you have to go to a job 5 to 7 days a week to earn as much money as you can, and of that money you need to deduct or divide it into different sections. So for your petrol, your food, your bills, your rent, your savings, etc. And then that savings is what you would consider your wealth, right? And that savings, for most people, would be towards getting a house mortgage. So it would be saving up a deposit for a house mortgage. Now, for most people, that's what's going on. Okay, that's what we think about. That's our realities, and so forth. And so when this politician, I've got a sick nose. When this politician was talking about 90% of young people earn all or most of their wealth from their job, it caught me off guard, I guess, because it's pointing out the complete difference in classes, isn't it? Classes, socioeconomic classes in our country. Because he's also admitting that people above that age bracket are making wealth, are making income off of other things. And what are those other things? Those other things might include stocks. Those other things might include investments in companies, investments in property, commercial or residential. And so, the whole topic has been going on recently, talking about the capital gains tax changes and negative gearing, right? And Labor is trying to say, we want to make these changes to make it fairer for young people to be able to buy their first home and whatnot. But like they're saying, because young people are at the auctions and whatnot up against, wealthy investors who are buying their 10th, 12th, 14th, like an investment property to make money on, to rent it out and whatnot. And it's not fair. We've got to, change the fairness of it all. So they're trying to make it sound like they're really thinking about the young people getting into the property market, right? But the truth of it is, what they're not really talking about at all is the fact that, okay, well, what about the cost of living already right now? Okay, what about this crisis we've been talking about for years in Australia, where everything is going up, and the wages aren't keeping up with that? What about, if you've got children and you're trying to save for a mortgage, a deposit for a mortgage, you're even worse off. Like, you're even further back in the playing field, aren't you, in terms of reaching that goal, because you've got a lot more financial responsibility, financial stresses than, say, a young couple that are both working and have no children. Okay, like Labor was trying to talk about it as if, oh, they're the good guys, thinking about the young people trying to get into the housing market. But it's like, okay, how are people are already struggling to get money up to get a deposit together. That's why the government had to try to, they've tried to look like the good guys by saying, oh, we'll introduce these various schemes about getting people into homes. But as soon as you are unable to pay like one of your mortgage repayments, the government is going to kick you out of that house and snap that house up for themselves. Meanwhile, you've paid 2 years of your mortgage or whatever, but you've got no claim over that property anymore. The government owns it now it's a government property. Okay, and I'm very skeptical of all of those schemes as well. I believe that the government just wants people to help them obtain houses that they can then claim are, government houses for social housing. But you've helped them pay for that. Okay. Now, so it's already tough enough on people just to save up for a deposit for a mortgage. Okay. And now you're also assuming, the Labor Party is also assuming that young people under 40 aren't interested in, what about if you're a 30-something-year-old? You could be maybe you're a single man, maybe you're even a couple, maybe you're even a family, okay? But let's just go with that you're a single man, okay? You're in your 30s. Maybe you're in a share house situation, like renting a house with some of your work colleagues. And you decide to make a personal investment in a property that you're going to lease out to renters as a sort of like a side hustle, a side business. And you want the benefits that other people have had up until now with negative gearing and whatnot. Okay, this is going to affect you then as well, these changes, isn't it? And then Labor Party wants to say, oh no, we're making all these changes, all these tax reforms, blah, blah, blah. And I looked up those. I looked into some of those a little bit, and they're talking about $250 back at tax time. Oh, that's exciting, isn't it? You'll be able to buy yourself maybe 2 slabs of beer with that. That'll get you far in life, won't it? And these other changes that are not coming in until 2028. What are you talking about, Labor? What are you talking about? Okay, and furthermore, when you're trying to understand the tax reforms, when you're trying to understand the budget, and you're trying to understand even what all the legislation, what all the bills and whatnot mean for you, especially if you have dreams and aspirations of, maybe you've been thinking about a business that you wanted to open. You're trying to think about being your own boss and getting out of the rat race of working for other people who generally treat you like crap. And you want to make bigger money, don't you? Because you want to get ahead in life. Whether it's just for yourself personally, or for your family. You want to get ahead. You don't want to just keep working for other people, because we all know that obviously if you work just for other people, then you're not earning as much as you could earn from um, working for yourself and having a business. Okay. So look, how many of us have sat around dreaming up all these different business ideas, and like those ladies who got together and wrote a letter to the Prime Minister, are pointing out that your dreams, your aspirations are being crushed by these changes with the budget. It got me thinking, because like when I was looking through these tax reforms and the budget and all that, what they're proposing, what they're doing, um, it's like you need an accountant, a lawyer, and your local politician as your team to understand what all of this stuff means. Like, how do you confidently even start up a business, that you feel like you've planned everything out, you've gotten quotes for this and that, and you've got estimate of what it would take as a startup, and you're willing to do all the hard work. You're willing to invest in yourself, right? But then you don't understand all the legal terminology and the accounting, finance, taxes, all of that sort of things. It's like you have to, from day one, before you've even bought your equipment, you need to go and have meetings with specialty lawyers and specialty accountants to understand what all of this means. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like it's disheartening in that way. I feel like that's half the reason why people don't take that next step. Like they don't take that step forward from being an employee for somebody else and going to a crap job every day, to actually taking the leap of faith and opening up their own business. People aren't doing that, aren't taking that leap of faith enough, because it's too scary, it's too intimidating, when you don't understand all the legal jargon and what everything means to you. And yeah, it would be good if there was, someone correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm missing something here, but like, where is there like a simple terminology, easy to understand for everyday Australians, website or something that gives you in-depth explanation of A, B, C, and D? Do you know what I mean? Like, of running a business, of starting up a business, of what your legal requirements are, your obligations, what your rights are, what the government can do for you. I do understand that I've heard things before about different grants for different things. Like I know that farmers get grants, and I've heard that there are grants from the government for small businesses to start up. Like, where do you apply for that? How do you apply for that? Who gets approved for that? Is that for everybody? Is that changing now with the new budget? Like, just where do you go to get all of this information in easy to understand language? I feel like there is a huge gap between everyday Australians with hopes and dreams, and business aspirations and whatnot to get ahead and become wealthier themselves, and be entrepreneurs and all this sort of stuff. There's a big gap between that and politicians and the government, and the understanding, like both sides don't understand each other. Like most Australians don't understand that politicians live in a completely different universe and don't understand our everyday problems, but politicians also just live in a completely different universe and they don't understand our everyday problems. They don't understand, I mean, even their education and the way they were brought up and who they mingle with and their social circles and their business investments and their personal investments and all their life, right, is like their life and everything they've got going on. They don't understand our problems. They are so far removed from our problems. It's like speaking different languages, you know. So I mean, I just think that that's a problem. I think it's a problem. This is more than just with Labor trying to say, oh, we're trying to help young people get into homes. I mean, the budget, the way the country currently is, it's you're bloody dreaming if you think that the government wants for everyday people under 40 years old to be rich, successful people. Okay, you're dreaming if you think that the government wants for the next generation, let's say the 20-year-olds, to all be wealthy off of investments and stocks and trusts and things like that, and not have to work. Okay, the government does not want that. Okay, the government wants for people to be filling all the jobs that are needed to keep the society working cohesively. Okay, they need people to be the people who drive your rubbish trucks. They need people to be the people at your local shops. They need people to be the people who work at your local power plant, okay, and miners and this and that. They don't want everyone, being wealthy off of their own investments and smart decisions and whatnot and being entrepreneurs and all this sort of thing. Of course they don't, because who's going to do them jobs? So yeah, we're not getting confused here about the government's hopes and dreams for us, okay? But yeah, I would like to see a place where things are more clearly written, not in legal jargon, so that more people can still try to push for their dreams and their aspirations. Because again, as those ladies were saying, it's already hard enough. You've already got to jump through enough hurdles. You've already got to manage enough, legal requirements and whatnot, which, right from your council to up to legal legislation for the whole country. And, it's stressful and it's intimidating and nerve-wracking and all these sort of things to take that leap of faith, isn't it? And try to pursue business dreams. I think that most Australians, that's kind of become the new Australian dream, hasn't it? Not necessarily just to own a house and mow a lawn every weekend. I feel like the new Australian dream is to be wealthy without having to be a slave. Working for yourself is one of those ways, investing in things is another way. But that's the whole point of why I wanted to make this video, is that politician pointing out that under 40 years old, 90% of our income is earned from our job. That was kind of like a wake-up call for me. Like it was like a button got pushed or something. Other people are making a lot of income off of a lot of other things, and we shouldn't be narrow-minded or tunnel-visioned or whatever, and just think about saving up for property You know, property investment, I think, is good. It is important. Um, you know, especially if you can invest in lots of property. Um, but it's almost like that's going to be harder to do, or harder to achieve wealth in an investment type of way for anyone new to the game. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I don't think that people should be tricked by Labor's use of language and emotive terminology, that they're trying to make it a even playing field for younger people. I don't think that is actually the case. Yeah. Anyway, that's my little 2 cents this morning. You all have a good day, and I'll see you again in another video. Bye.